A few months ago, I was given an access code to a game that only a few players have had a chance to try, that being the game called Soulframe. This game is made by the same folks who made Warframe, that being Digital Extremes. Now, originally when looking at this, I just assumed that maybe Soulframe was like a solo story-driven experience with some like semi-Souls-like combat, but far removed from what D's equation has been for Warframe. Turns out, I was completely wrong. While yes, the story does seem to play a major role, this game has a ton of depth, and it almost seems like it's going down the same path as Warframe. And if there is one thing we can give DE credit for, is that when they say their games are free, they mean it. They're actually free. Sure, you can buy a number of things. You could drip out until your bank account is depleted, but from start to finish, the content is free, which has left me perplexed in multiple streams, wondering how the hell is Digital Extremes making not one, but two completely free-to-play experiences without it being a monetization hellhole. Today, guys, we're going to be going over everything related to Soulframe, what we know so far, where the game stands in development right now, and also how you can get a chance to try it out for yourself. Yes, we've got a few codes. Now, before we dive into what Soulframe is, I think it is important to give a quick rundown on what the developers are trying to create here. First and foremost, leading the charge is Steve Sinclair, who is the CEO of Digital Extremes. Now, unlike your typical CEO, Steve is very involved. I'm talking like literally every stream, whether it's Warframe or Soulframe, he is present. And let me just say, I have actually worked with other development studios where for years, and I'm talking years, we never get to meet the CEO. And not that I have to meet the CEO. Who am I, right? I'm just a guy who plays video games, but it is nice to see Steve at the helm here, which really speaks to his passion about what they're working on. And it also means that he has a personal stake in the development of Soulframe. Now, back in 2022, in a Twitter post on the Warframe account, he announced that development on Soulframe had officially begun. Since then, the team has released 9 Preludes, which are essentially pre-alpha versions of the game. Which I do want to stress, this game is still very much in early stages of development, so everything is subject to change. Next, we have Jeff Crooks, the creative director who, like Steve, has been with D since the infantile stages of Warframe. The last person I want to mention, though, is the senior community manager, Sarah Aslan. Of course, there are many other people working on Soulframe behind the scenes, but most community QA streamers and interviews features these 3 folks. Now, also in stride with Warframe, DE has started to host dev streams for Soulframe, and essentially these dev streams serve as a way for the developers to have some face time with the community while going over upcoming changes or updates to the game, which is something you never really see from the majority of game studios. It's one of the reasons why DE has such a strong relationship with the community. But Autocross, you haven't even told us what Soulframe even is. Soulframe, at its core, is a third-person fantasy MMO, similar to Warframe, with the biggest difference, though, being the setting, where Warframe leans heavily into like space, sci-fi, and speed. Soulframe, on the other hand, is set more in the traditional fantasy universe, with a strong focus on magic and methodical melee combat. In an interview with IGN, Steve said that a main focus early on was making sure they weren't just rehashing things from Warframe into Soulframe. Quote, "I remember when we drew a line and we wrote Warframe on this side, and we said fast, industrial, bleak, apocalyptic, sci-fi, glowy, cynical, right? And then on the other side, we just kind of wrote the opposite of those. Slower, natural, romantic, optimistic, no celebration of gore, and stuff like that." Now, of course, some things do carry over, and this is the case with pretty much all games and studios. Bungie, for example, here recently revealed gameplay of their new game Marathon, which is a separate IP from Destiny, but it's on that signature Tiger engine. Therefore, the gunplay is still there. A lot of comparisons are being made between Marathon and Destiny, and you can do the same here between Warframe and Soulframe, seeing that yes, they do share similar DNA. With that being said, though, Soulframe is trying to create its own success, and that's even more evident when you look at the world itself. This game is set in open environments where exploration is key, almost reminding me of Elden Ring, which was actually one of the sources of inspiration. In that same IGN interview, Steve even referred to Soulframe jokingly as Dark Elden Frame of the Wilds. And while he may have said it as a joke, it's a pretty accurate description, although he was hesitant to declare it an open world game, explaining they don't want to mislead people in any way, and that the term open world is a bit overused to describe many games. But while the main play space is certainly reminiscent of an open world game, a large portion of the game's content comes from instance-based dungeons. Now, these dungeons are randomly generated tile sets similar to Warframe missions. But unlike Warframe missions, where there's a loop, you do the mission, you come back to the orbiter, you rinse and repeat, in Soulframe, the idea was to give the world a more connected feel, to keep the gameplay from being broken up by menus. Now, one thing to take note of for my Warframe players, there is no bullet jumping or aim gliding inside of Soulframe. You could jump normally, but the experience is very much much boots on the ground, which is a point the team takes full advantage of in their dungeon design. With a more grounded approach to movement, this allows the developers to create more intentional layouts, rewarding exploration and puzzle solving. Whereas in Warframe, we zoom in, baby. Now inside of these dungeons, you'll find packs of enemies, you'll be able to loot chests, potentially even bosses that may be tied to certain quests. So far, there's a pretty decent amount of variety. You may even come across dungeons that consist of very narrow corridors, or even one that opens up into these massive underground city-looking areas. Now, you can also expect to find many different branching paths within the dungeons. There's tons of rooms leading to different directions that may or may not interconnect with each other. And once you leave a dungeon, you're immediately spit back into the open world quite seamlessly. Again, adding to that connected feel that the developers were aiming for. Now, this brings us to our other area called the Nightfold. This area, which you can seamlessly teleport to with a snap of your finger, is one of the coolest areas I've ever seen in a video game. This serves as your main hub or your base of operations, or for my Warframe players, essentially your orbiter. Now, you're introduced to this almost immediately after opening the game, and the coolest part about it is that it just takes a single click of a button and boom, you're there. There's no menus, there's no loading screens. You just instantly transport to this main hub. Now, this is where you're going to do all of your character customization. You can also swap between packs that are available in the game, which are these arm attachments, which are the equivalent to Warframes. Now, when we first played, you were actually able to choose between 3 different packs, but as of Prelude 9, it locks you into the pack of your choice. So I'm not 100% sure how many different packs there are currently in the pre-alpha, but just know they've been adding more and more with each update. Now, as mentioned before, you can also change your armor and weapons here as well, while also purchasing skills with skill points for your selected packs or weapons. Now, your weapons will scale differently depending on the 3 different virtues, that being courage, spirit, and grace. For example, the bow, the short blades, scale with grace, where the polearm scales with courage. Think of these as your strength and dexterity stats. The Nightfold is also the place where you're going to be interacting with the ancestors. These function as NPCs that house the different systems present in the game. For example, one of the ancestors you can find is a blacksmith, where you can craft weapons and armor, and just like in Warframe, there is a timer tied to the crafting of these items. Now, the first ancestor you meet through the main quest is Orlick, who will guide you through the early parts of the main quests. They function as your codex, storing any lore you may come across in the open world for you to read. So in a way, the Nightfold, again, is like your orbiter from Warframe, where you could change your character's loadouts, as well as craft weapons and armor, and even mod your weapons to a certain degree. In previous Preludes, this was tied to another ancestor character, but they have since moved from the Nightfold to another place in the world. But right-clicking on your weapons in the equipment screen will allow you to place motes on them, which grant various different bonuses to that weapon. Now, this is much more simplistic than modding in Warframe, but the team has said before, they're trying to make a simpler kind of game. So don't expect the vast amount of modding and customization that Warframe is known for. Now, I won't lie, guys, I don't really like hearing that. I love complexity. I think sometimes that complexity is actually what adds character to the game and makes that game stand out. You don't want your game to be too simple, because then you run into a situation that after releasing it fully to the world, the game becomes solved. A great quote here recently by Shroud is that some game developers go in there with the intention of removing all friction in certain games, and although yes, you do make the game simpler, sometimes it's the friction that makes the game what it is. At the same time, I wouldn't say Warframe's mod system is perfect. Granted, I have to watch guides upon guides. I literally have the wiki pulled up at all times, so it's not like I'm the modeled Warframe player. I don't know. I kind of like that it is complex, and that intrigues me. It makes me feel good when I do obtain understanding of it further. Now, as for the gameplay of Soulframe, when you start out, you have about 2 to 3 hours worth of main quest content. Now, this will introduce you to the world as a whole, as well as Orlick, as mentioned previously. Now, you have a sparrow companion that you can snap to summon that will show you the way to your next objective, which is amazing. And this essentially is what allows DE to keep a very clean HUD outside of maybe combat, which in my opinion adds to the immersion of the game. You don't have all these icons up on the map. You just snap your sparrow, who will then lead you to whatever quest that you currently have selected, whether that be a main or side quest. Now, while working through the main quests, the game introduces you to many of the mechanics of the world, such as dungeons, various side activities, as well as boss fights. While on the topic of boss fights, one thing that may be misunderstood is that at its core, it's not really Souls-like, even though it's in the name. You see, combat and enemy attacks, for the time being, are fairly simple. There's also next to no consequences for dying. You don't lose anything on death, and you can actually revive yourself as well. Now, when you die, you'll take control of a sparrow at one of these checkpoints that you'll see around the map map and in dungeons. From here, you could choose to revive at that point, or you could fly to where you died and revive yourself. Now, there is a countdown timer, but it's very forgiving. And in all my time playing, I've only ever had one moment where I couldn't reach my body in time. The only time dying really means something is when you're fighting bosses tied to the main story. But even that just makes you start from the beginning. So as of the time of this recording, there really isn't any major consequences out there when playing Soulframe. Now, as far as the story of Soulframe, it's still a bit unclear, which is to be expected. But from what we can gather they're playing, you are an envoy tasked with cleansing the corruption spread by a group referred to as the Ode. This is why guarding nature and cleansing the world play a key role in gameplay, as many objectives will have you defeating a group of enemies to free animals, and capturing and destroying these towers that are spreading corruption called Odin Moaners. Now, you're free to explore the world at your own pace. There isn't anything forcing you to follow the main quest if you don't want to, but that's the general loop of Soulframe in its early state. You complete the main quests, and then exploration is really key for leveling up, as well as upgrading your Nightfold. Now, there isn't a whole lot of hand-holding here. For instance, if you're looking to get the blacksmith ancestor so you can start crafting, you got to go out and look for her. If you want to customize your character's colors, you have to explore and find the characters that can do that for you. Personally, I like the system. Essentially building up your hub world almost reminds me of like the room requirements from Harry Potter, plus the fact that each gameplay system has a fleshed out character associated with it with their own backstory and fantastic voice acting. Like, literally just listen to this VA right here.
You sneak! I would have smelt your aura from here, were my sight not drowned in brine. I am the witch Verminia. Enchantée.
Oh, that was sexy. Now, each POI you visit will initially appear as a bunch of random characters, but you can find these wisp things around the area and suck them up to slowly reveal the name of the area, which will also provide you with some lore as well. But now let's talk about combat. This has been a hot topic in the community for a while now, as early footage of melee combat and trailers always looked janky and somewhat floaty. Warframe melee combat isn't exactly renowned for its depth or its feel. Many people were quick to point to the combat in the Davari paradox from Warframe as a point of reference, and anyone who's played knows that the melee combat there isn't very polished. For games like Warframe, Davari is a small fraction of the bigger picture. It's not a massive deal. However, in Soulframe, where your primary way of dealing damage is through melee combat, it is a big issue, and it's an issue that needs solving. After playing a bit, I will say that the combat does lack a strong sense of impact. Many attacks don't really feel like they're doing damage, as the enemies sometimes just flat out don't react to you hitting them. At the same time, it's also kind of hard to judge, because it's not like we're going to be balling out with like the best melee weapons right out the gates. This is when I'm really interested in seeing like what is considered like an in-game build. How does the melee combat look at that top level? What I will say though is that anyone saying that this combat is from Deviri, it's not. Soulframe feels leagues better, and in my opinion is much more responsive than Deviri, but hopefully we'll continue to see improvements. Now I want to circle back to packs that we mentioned earlier. These packs change up gameplay quite significantly, giving you 3 new skills as well as a skill tree to play with for each of them. Now, one pack we played with was Fey Pack, which is very nature-centric, that allows you to shoot a swarm of birds at enemies to deal damage, or fire a petrifying arrow, turning enemies into stone. We also played around with the Ode Tempest Pack, which allows you to cast a rolling ball under the ground that will push enemies back and explode, or a sphere that will orbit you and protect you from attacks. Now, there are others, but those are the 2 that we played with most. One thing we did get to play with, but isn't in the game currently, are the idle weapons. Now, you can enter what is called soul mode in this game, which allows you to cast abilities, snatch up wisps, or even perform attacks on enemies glowing like this. Now, previously, this would also allow you to use your specific pack's idle weapon. For example, with the Fey Pact, this was a supercharged bow that would deal chunky damage. But for the Ode Tempest, this was a shoulder-mounted turret that would increase its rate of fire as you fired more. Now, these have since been removed, and as for why, on the official Soulframe Discord, Sarah, the community manager, said to reduce complexity and prepare for future systems coming in Prelude 10. Idols have been removed from all packs. These will return as mythic tier earnable weapons, bringing their power back with a more focused purpose in your arsenal. So these weapons will return, but they aren't present at this moment. Now, in Prelude 9D is also completely opened up the world to us, and it's pretty massive. Back when we first played, this was the size of the map, but now this is the map we currently have. You can see the size difference here side by side. Now, DE did warn that there isn't much of anything to do in these areas as of yet besides explore. They wanted players to see what they they've been working on. They also added a new feature where you need to find these corrupted trees, then cleanse them, which would then reveal areas of the map which are covered in fog when you start. Now, these trees aren't super hard to find or anything. If you like zoom in on the map, you can see the icons of the trees even behind the fog. So not like complete fog of war. Now, one final note about Prelude 9 is that this update also gives us the ability to join 3 new factions: the Silent Rose, Alka's Children, or the Kith of Kings. Each faction has their own hub area, which are all very distinct. Now, at the time of this recording, they have very basic rank rewards, and mechanically, they're also very simple, but I'm sure this will be expanded on in the future as well. Now, the game also received various visual improvements with this update, the most obvious being these flowers sprinkled all throughout the world, which adds a very nice splash of color to the game. And that's pretty much everything we have so far on Soulframe. This game is still in development, and right now, one of the biggest requests from the community is to add mounts. D has stated that they are trying different methods to implement mounts into the game, going on to say that they are hesitant to add any mounts too early since the map was so much smaller than it is currently. Currently, right now, you can actually turn yourself into like a wolf and you can run a bit faster, but mounts would be dope. And if you play Soulframe right now, you can actually see that there is a key bind literally for a mount. So it's likely only a matter of time before we get those into the game. We've also seen new concepts of dungeon layouts, which look really cool. The dev streams themselves have showed off new enemies, new weapons, new allies, new customization, you name it. Now, monetization hasn't been written in stone as of yet, but D has clarified that you can expect it to be similar to Warframe, as Soulframe will also be completely free to play. So many of these cosmetics will be tied to microtransactions, which in my opinion is fine, considering just the sheer amount of content you get for absolutely free. Overall, guys, my experience with Soulframe has been fun. I've enjoyed it, but I definitely want more. I need more. I would love for this game to be one of my main games. I love these fantasy elements. I love the seamless open world, the ability to transition to your personal hub, the sound design, the immersion, the voice acting. I want to get completely lost in this game, and I want more content, so much more. And I know DE is working, and I hope they continue to deliver, guys. Now, if you're interested in playing Soulframe, here recently DE announced during their next dev stream, April the 25th at 11 Eastern, if you simply watch for 30 minutes, you will receive a Prelude 9 code as a Twitch drop. We'll be tuning in since they'll also be sharing a first look at Prelude 10, but just note, you have to watch the Soulframe Twitch broadcast at twitch.tv/playsoulframe to get your own code. But this is a perfect opportunity, guys, if you're looking to try this game out for yourself. So far, I like where it is. I love the setting. I love what they're trying to do here. I'm looking forward to seeing Prelude 10, and I hope DE continues to ball out with this game. Fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching, and as always,
Slap that like button like your mama told you right.